A Utah mom, apparently terrified of the end times, reportedly kidnapped her children and took off on a plane overseas. That is the accusation from police in West Jordan, Utah. And now there's a warrant out for her arrest as investigators try to figure out where exactly she might be and if her 4 kids are safe. We're on the case presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. The woman we're talking about today is 35-year-old Elleshia Anne Seymour. She's a mom of 4 children, 3 sons and a daughter, with 2 different ex-husbands. The eldest child is 11 and the youngest is just 3 years old. This is according to a GoFundMe page that was started by one of the dads who are now searching for their kids. Police say that Seymour wanted to keep those kids to herself and she went to extreme lengths to do it. And now she has state, federal, potentially international authorities trying to track her down. So let's get into this case. And it takes place in West Jordan, Utah, which is a suburb of Salt Lake City. Police there filed a warrant in Salt Lake County Court and they called for Seymour to be found, brought back to the United States and locked up. But obviously if she's overseas, that's not exactly an easy process. Now, this warrant that we've looked through indicates that Elleshia Seymour is facing 4 felony charges of custodial interference, 1 for each child she is accused of taking to Europe without their dad's permission. Now, according to investigators, Seymour has joint custody agreements with both of her exes. Each count filed against her is a 3rd-degree felony, and that carries up to 5 years in prison in Utah if Seymour were to be convicted. This is according to the state's sentencing guidelines. According to the arrest warrant, quote, "The defendant did during a period of time when another individual is entitled to visitation of the child, the actor takes, entices, conceals, detains, or withholds the child from the individual entitled to visitation of the child with the intent to interfere with the visitation of the child." Now that's a lot of legal words back and forth kind of explaining things, but you get the sense of what authorities are accusing Seymour of. Now the charges also include the assertion that Seymour, quote, "removed, caused the removal, or directed the removal of the child from the state." And we're not just talking the state, we are talking the country. So this is what we know at this point about the last time that anyone seems to have seen this mom and the kids that she has allegedly taken with her. Now, Seymour was spotted on camera at Salt Lake City's airport boarding an international flight with all 4 of the kids. One of Seymour's ex-husbands says that Seymour had actually been planning this for a while, and he claims that she executed that plan during a period when she had the kids for an extended period of time over Thanksgiving. He told local TV station KSL that it was actually a babysitter who alerted him to the situation when she wanted to know why the family hadn't been coming to daycare after the holiday. Imagine being this dad and getting that phone call from a babysitter and then realizing that this potential plan that maybe you heard about, that it was actually being put into motion. Now, when multiple people were unable to get in touch with Seymour, police did a welfare check. And here's what the warrant has to say about that. Quote, "When officers arrived at Seymour's residence," and that's on a street called Gardner Stopway in West Jordan, "they found the door unlocked and the apartment unoccupied. Attempts to contact Seymour by phone were also unsuccessful." Seymour's coworker and friend both reported that they had been unable to contact Seymour since November 29th of this year, so a little after Thanksgiving. Seymour's former boyfriend advised that Seymour had recently discussed obtaining passports and leaving the country, expressing concerns about biblical events and the end of times. Quote, "A missing persons investigation was launched. Over the following days, Seymour's vehicle was located in a parking lot at the Salt Lake City International Airport, and a notebook containing plans to shred documents, discard phones, and take passports was found inside Seymour's apartment. Video footage from the airport showed Seymour and her 4 children entering the airport on November 29th, where they boarded a one-way flight bound for Amsterdam, and the flight was to end in Croatia. Now, there's also a voicemail. And in the voicemail that was left for one of the dads on December 2nd, so a couple days after this flight, Seymour claimed that she was in France with the children. And she stated that she was looking for a permanent residence and needed to get the children out because the end times were coming. Now, quote, by December 10th, the time for Seymour to return the children to the fathers for their court-ordered parent time had long since elapsed. Detectives confirmed with both that they were not aware and had never consented to let Seymour remove the children from the state or the country based on all available information. Seymour appears to have no intention to return the children to the United States. This is according to this warrant that we read through from South Jordan Police and Salt Lake County Court. It goes on to say the state requests that the defendant be held without bail until further notice in this matter because the defendant is charged with a felony. There is substantial evidence supporting the charge, and there is clear and convincing evidence that the defendant would constitute a substantial danger to any other individual or to the community and is likely to flee the jurisdiction of the court if released on bail. Now, we're talking about bail here, but again, this is a woman with 4 kids who's claiming to be in France, but it's unclear if she's actually there or in some other part of the world. Now, the warrant goes on to say many witnesses have expressed concerns about the defendant's mental stability, indicating that she has previously suffered from emotional breakdowns and hallucinations. The defendant appears to have adopted extreme beliefs regarding the end of times, such that she believed it necessary to uproot her children and their lives and flee the country. There's a very real risk that the defendant's extreme erratic behavior will escalate and put her children at risk if she is released on bail. Now, obviously, they have to arrest her first. They have to find her and these kids first. Now, according to reporting from Utah media outlet ABC4, the FBI is now involved in this investigation, and the dad of the 3 older children, his name is Kendall. He started a GoFundMe page to raise money so that he can go to Europe to get his kids, or at least try to find them. Now, we have learned more about the background of the case and this family from that fundraising page. It reads, to put it bluntly, my kids have been abducted overseas by their mother. On Sunday, November 30th, my ex-wife flew to Europe, kidnapping all 3 of my kids and her 4th child from another dad. We didn't learn until Tuesday, December 2nd that anyone was missing. Elle forged passport documents for the kids, left behind a note dictating a delusional message from God promising she would be in Italy by Christmas, and a to-do list that mentioned shred paperwork, destroy identifying photos, throw away phone, purchase prepaid phone. Now, he mentions Italy there. So at this point, we are at country number 4 that's been referenced as possible locations where this mom may be, because the flight was to Amsterdam in the Netherlands. The flight was supposed to go to Croatia. And then you have her saying she was in France, and now some note being left behind saying that she wanted to be in Italy by Christmas. And now we're roughly a week after Christmas. Now, Kendall, one of the ex-husbands, lays out the beginnings of a plan to get them to safety while also protecting their mental health. He says, I know someone who was dropped off in a foreign country at 8 years old where they didn't speak the language, and they strongly suggested that we personally go pick them up wherever they are found. If we can be there to get them ASAP after mom is arrested, they will feel safer and will not suffer as much wondering what is going to happen to them, to their mom, and their future. She hasn't been located, but the FBI has good people working on it who love their job, and working together with family connections will get the kids home as soon as possible. Tickets to Europe are not cheap. We need 2 round-trip flights, perhaps a hotel, and 3 to 4 one-way return flights. We don't know yet who will pick up the 4th child. Any funds received in excess of flight costs will go towards therapy needed because of this traumatic experience. My genuine hope is that the kids are found quickly and we can pick them up while they still think they're on vacation. Kendall also spoke with outlet KSL TV, saying that he thinks that Seymour is not in her right mind. I didn't know about any of these ideas of hers until a couple weeks ago when someone found her TikTok account. She thinks Salt Lake is going to be destroyed, and she is trying to get the kids to safety. My only hope is that she is motivated to protect them. There were no signs of that when we were married or divorced in the last 5 years. According to Kendall, this is Seymour's ex-husband, she does not have family or contacts in Europe as far as he knows. Now, anyone with information is being asked to contact West Jordan Police. They have a non-emergency number. You can see it right here on your screen, 801-840-4000. A big tool for us when you work in true crime is something like TruthFinder, a powerful public record search service that we use to do research here on Law and Crime on the people involved in our stories. It's incredibly useful because you plug in a name and you can get address information, you can get criminal history, work history, and much more. And let me say this, it can also give you some peace of mind if you don't work in true crime, because TruthFinder is one of the largest public record search services in the US, and with a paid subscription, you get access to unlimited reports about almost anyone, and that can include looking up registered sex offenders in your area. So if you're a parent, that's something that can definitely give you some peace of mind. You might even be shocked to see what information TruthFinder has on you. Stay informed, stay safe, check public records with TruthFinder now at truthfinder.com/OTC. Join us now to talk more about this case is retired FBI agent and attorney Bobby Chacon. It's always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for being with us on this one. How do you go about, she's mentioned multiple countries that she may be in, somewhere in Europe. How do you go about finding her, knowing that she's left the country?
Well, Chris, this is where really a true partnership really can bring some results to bear because, on the one hand, the investigation starts in Utah, where she took the kids from, and apparently she left a note, and all of her statements and her friends are there, and then you have multiple countries overseas, and that's why the FBI partners with local law enforcement in these types of cases, because we have offices in over 180 countries. We have offices in Italy. We have agents full-time in France, and all the places she might have gone in Italy, there are FBI agents full-time stationed there, living there. Not only living there, but their job is to maintain liaison with the local police there. So whenever leads that are going to be developed out of the local case in Utah need some attention overseas, it's a lot different. For example, imagine a detective in Salt Lake City just picking up the phone and cold calling a cop in Italy, rather than an FBI agent in Salt Lake City picking up a phone and calling up an FBI agent in Rome. They may know each other, and so that's where this partnership really kind of is effective. So they're looking at what she said, her statements made. Obviously, the FBI has that digital capability of doing a deep dive on her computer where she searched. Did she search Lake Como, 6 months ago, or things like that? So they're looking at searches because when we look at a fugitive, any really type of fugitive, but particularly in this case, they don't go somewhere cold that they don't know anything about. So most likely, if they've never been there before, then they've searched for it online somehow, phone, laptop, somewhere they've looked into this place. And if they have been there before, well, that's an even easier job. Then where they've been before, and you can put leads out to those places. And then the second part is, like we do here on local cases, is plaster their picture all over the place. She's traveling with 4 kids. A single mom with 4 kids in tow is not easy to hide. So you're going to get that attention. People are going to notice that, particularly if she's American and doesn't speak the local language. That's something that's going to raise even more suspicion or attention on her. So if you can get that information out to those local areas in those foreign countries, people are going to say, oh, yeah, there's a woman with 4 kids who just rented an Airbnb or whatever it is down the road in Italy, France, wherever, or Croatia, wherever it may be. And so you just kind of turn the heat up on somebody like that. Put their pictures out, put the pictures of the kids out, get that story out in those areas where she may be, and some of those local people are going to recognize her.
And I also think, too, because there was, I think the 4 countries, she took an original flight, it was to Amsterdam, and then it was going to continue on to Croatia. She leaves a voicemail that she's in France. She said around Christmas she wanted to be in Italy. So she's hitting all different parts of Europe. Here in the U.S., when there's a manhunt, I know we've talked about them, and it's like, say a fugitive goes to a 7-Eleven, buys a Gatorade, that credit card then pings, and then law enforcement kind of gets an idea of where someone might be. How does an international search, some of the things, because it's been several weeks that they've been gone, they have to be living off something at this point, some of the things that could flag law enforcement to where she might be?
Yeah, well, that's a great point. And part of the local investigation is to see, did she liquidate stuff? Did she sell things to create cash so she can spend cash there. We know she intended to do this by, she left a laundry list, and her to-do list included things like, get rid of the phone, buy a prepaid phone. So she has a consciousness of avoiding authorities, a consciousness of avoiding the things that she's probably seen on television, other people getting caught at. So, there's a level of acknowledgement that what she's doing is wrong. There's a level of acknowledgement of things that what we call forensic countermeasures that she's taking part in that's going to make it more difficult to find her. So they're probably looking through anything she may have liquidated, how much cash she may have had on hand. Did she buy prepaid? Especially this time of year, people buy gift cards all the time. You can go and buy prepaid gift cards in any store and use them as cash overseas. Now, whether they're trackable or not is more difficult than, say, you or I using our debit card or something. So they're going to be looking into, local investigation is going to be looking into whether she converted some of her assets here either into cash or into cards that are less likely to be traced or more difficult to be traced. And maybe she's living off those kind of things for a while. But in the end, you run out of cash and you run out of those other assets that are less likely to be traced. So there's a level of patience that's required in these investigations. You hope the children aren't in danger. They're with their mother. She took them away because she wants to be with them. And so it's a matter of, being patient and getting the word out and then, trying to track her.
How do you balance when you're doing an investigation like this, where that patience and knowing that something may break and you have to be prepared for that, but then at the same time, apparently she was talking about the end times. She has some sort of extreme religious views. There are questions about her mental health. Especially talking about any sort of apocalypse situation, how do you balance like being patient, but then at the same time knowing that she had some sort of, weird off the radar kind of religious view related to the end times, and she has these kids?
Yeah, when I read that does, quite frankly, that does increase the concern and increase the level of, we got to get this person back. Because, obviously, we all know it harkens back to Lori Daybell, Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow, right? When they had this end of times type of mentality. And so we know what can happen in those cases. So sure, that does kind of ratchet up the concern. And when I say patience, I don't mean that they're just kind of sitting back, and taking their time. They're doing everything they can as if these children are in danger. It's just that you do have that extra layer of, this is a mother who took her children away because she wants to be with them. But like you said, she may want to be with them because the world is ending. And if that's her worldview, then that's an extra concern on why we need to get this. So when I say investigative patience, I don't mean like they're just waiting around and doing things. It's just that, you as an investigator, you kind of feel a little bit like, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. But you certainly don't waste any time, because obviously these children, because of her mental state, could be in danger.
No, absolutely. And I think too, like with her mental state, like the to-do list that was found at her house, which is like, it was very just straightforward of things if you were going to abduct kids. And look, every parent kind of makes to-do lists. It's just kind of part of the deal. But like, what stood out to you about the fact that, like, because to me it was like so brazen that it was like, get rid of cell phone, get a prepaid phone. It's like if you were a criminal doing something, that's literally laying everything out almost in a way that it's like so brazen it's hard to believe.
Yeah, the first thing that surprised me was that they found it at all, because the last thing on all those lists usually is burn this list or get rid of this list, but the fact that she left it behind, it really kind of goes to her mental state. If she really thinks the world is going to end, she doesn't care that somebody finds that list, because the world is going to end in her mind. And so, the world may be ending before anybody even finds that when she's writing it and leaving it behind. So it depends on, and I'm sure that the Utah authorities are going through her family, her friends, and seeing exactly what type of mental state she was in, along the spectrum of, mental illness on where she fell. And that's going to kind of dictate, the concern level that they have for her and the children. So, yeah, I was surprised that they found it at all, because oftentimes we don't find that. And when you do find it, it's usually, they left it behind by mistake, or they hid it somewhere where they didn't think it would be found, or they put it in the trash and we found it in the trash. But yeah, when I saw that it was just left behind, that's like, she probably just thinks that it's not going to matter if people find it, because she truly does think the world is coming to an end.
Yeah, and just kind of going back to the Europe part of it, the fact it's been so many weeks that she doesn't apparently, according to the ex-husband, have any sort of ties to Europe or people she knows in Europe, like they have to be sticking out like sore thumbs, especially, I mean, wherever they may be. I mean, even places where you see tourists and now her face is out there. If and when she is captured by authorities, whoever it may be, like what's the process of getting her back to Utah?
Well, there's a couple of ways that can happen. So the FBI could get a UFAP, what we call a UFAP warrant, which is an unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. So if there's a warrant, for example, a local warrant for her in Utah, and then we have evidence that she fled to avoid that prosecution. And if she fled internationally, that's unlawful flight to avoid prosecution, or UFAP. And so there's a UFAP warrant. And so depending on the country she's in, the FBI office there will use that UFAP warrant, and they get locally what's called a provisional arrest warrant, which is like, say she's in Italy, they get an Italian arrest warrant based on our U.S. federal warrant. And then that just gives the Italian authorities local jurisdiction to take her into Italian custody. Then she gets taken before Italian court, and then they say, okay, this is a federal warrant out of the United States, and she's subject to extradition, depending on what treaties we have in place with the country where she's found. Sometimes it's formal extradition treaties. Sometimes it's just a memorandum of understanding, or we call it MOU, that has kind of a extradition light type of process to it. So it will depend on what route they go. They could, I mean, there's civil penalties also under the Hague Convention about traveling with children unauthorized through Europe and stuff. So that's more of a civil remedy. But it will also depend on basically where she is. But in effect, basically, she's going to be taken into custody locally by the local authorities, because the FBI working overseas doesn't have the jurisdiction to just take people into custody in a foreign country, and we respect sovereignty of foreign countries. So what they'll do is the local authorities will have the provisional arrest warrant based on the U.S. warrant, and they'll take her into custody before a local judge in that country, and that judge will then subject her to whatever the treaties say, whatever the extradition process is for that country, and then she'll be ultimately returned to the United States.
Logistically, would her and the kid, do they fly commercial back? I mean, international flights aren't, they're not cheap, but I mean, is it like people who are leaving a family vacation in Rome, if she was found there, like she'll be on the flight with you going back to Utah?
Sometimes, yeah, the marshals handle that. The U.S. Marshals generally handle that. Sometimes the Bureau will handle it. We do have a private Bureau jets at our disposal if that's the case. If we want to do it that way, that depends on some factors too. Now the children, they won't be taken into custody. They'll be taken in for safeguarding. They won't be taken into criminal custody. But I've read already that the father of 3 of those children here, is ready to fly over there wherever she's found, with his fiance, and actually get his 3 children back and take them back himself. Probably, obviously, on a commercial flight. And I think he has a GoFundMe to raise money for those flights. But the children aren't going to be subject to any kind of custody, so they'll probably be in the care of whatever Child Protective Services type of social agency they have in that country. And if the father can get there quick enough, he'll just take them right away. And he has legal custody here in the United States, at least 50-50 right now. And so he has the authority and the ability to take those children into his custody and bring them home, probably commercially. And how she gets brought back depends on the amount of time it takes to extradite her. The marshals do sometimes use commercial flights. They do use their own planes, and then the FBI has its planes it can use as well.
And in this case, I know like Chad and Lori Daybell, I certainly think of that when you think of like her religious beliefs in the end times. But, this was a complicated family. She has 2 ex-husbands. She has children with 2 other people. There were, different sorts of custody arrangements that were made. But just in your experience in general, like how common is a case like this where you might have a parent who would take a child out of the country somewhere else, and then the FBI has to get involved in getting those kids back?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say it's common, but it's also not uncommon. And we have, the FBI, the U.S. government really passed laws, international parental kidnapping laws here in our state. We have, crimes. So Congress passed laws specifically to address this situation because it happens more often than should, or it ever should. But yeah, so we have our CARD team, CARD. The FBI has its child abduction rapid deployment team. So we have teams that get ready to deploy in these kind of cases, investigators, analysts, behavioral people to do a profile. And so they deploy on these cases, unfortunately, probably more than they'd like. But yeah, it does happen. We do hear about this international parental kidnapping. Especially now, every year we see the amount of marriages to foreign nationals is always kind of increasing. We're becoming more of a global society, and so people are getting dual citizenships, and they're marrying people from foreign countries, which is fine. My grandparents were all from foreign countries, and so but that does increase the rate at which these things happen when there's a breakup or a bad breakup between two parents that are both born in the United States. They take them elsewhere in the United States. If you're married to somebody that's from another country, the more likely scenario is they return to their country with the children. We've seen it. It's not uncommon, but it's obviously not as common as a domestic situation.
Oh, for sure. And you're seeing just the attention on this story, and you just hope these kids are okay and they can be able to track her down and bring her back to Utah, and we'll see what the legal system does.
This one's a little different. I will say this, Chris, excuse me, this one's a little different because, like I said, normally the cases we see of international parental kidnapping, one of the parents is from that other country. They're a foreign national. We saw it in Brazil a couple of years ago. I think one of the parents actually died in that case, but the other parent is a foreign national. So that's a little easier because we kind of know where they're going. They're going back home. Where they have the protection of their family back home, and the system back home favors, the foreign national. In this case, it's a little more unusual because she doesn't have a connection to any of these countries, which makes it a little more difficult to know where she's going, but it also makes it a little more easy because like you said earlier, she's going to stand out. If we can get her picture and her face and those kids' pictures, in Italy, in Croatia, in France, all the places she mentioned, if she's in some little village where they don't get a lot of American news or U.S.-based news, people might see her but might not know that she's wanted. And, now's the time of year where people do travel. So it's a heightened tourist thing. So having children in a foreign country is probably not as unusual as it is other times of the year. So, there's both benefits and downsides to the fact that, she's going to a place where, people may not know her. And so, I think that's why the more we can push this story down into those areas where she mentioned she might be, the more chance that somebody on the local side over there in Europe is going to recognize her. Because right now, if they're not seeing our news, they're just going to see a woman with 4 kids, which, may not be unusual at this time of year.
Well, and the other thing I was thinking too, just as we're talking about that, just of because for me, it's like, how is she able to go undetected with 4 kids for now multiple weeks? Like, this was after Thanksgiving, all of this began. And I mean, I haven't been to Europe in a couple of years, but it's like, cash is still something that's probably far more prevalent there than like how cashless the US is. So it's like, she's not putting down a credit card at a hotel that would like, I assume she's not going to like a Marriott or something like that, where it would like flag the system. So it's like she's probably able to go undetected. From the attorney part of it, like when they get back, eventually if and when she's caught, I mean, she clearly has, some sort of mental health issue, but like what would the bar have to be for like any sort of insanity to come into play when you have someone kind of going back to like the Lori Daybell part of it, of like she clearly had some very, disturbing religious beliefs, but still faced very serious, very different situation, I know, and I'm kind of just spitballing here, but like how could that factor into whether there's anything for her defense for taking these kids to the other side of the world?
Well, look, I mean, obviously if they come back and a professional examines her and says, yeah, she did believe the end of days was coming, but that, that's offset because insanity, a lot of times, it's the state laws that rule. It's different in each state, but like insanity is, one of the hallmarks of it is you didn't know right from wrong. You didn't know what you were doing was wrong. And in the law, we have what's called mens rea, which is a bad intent, and you have to have that. Well, what works against her insanity defense in this case is the to-do list. She clearly made a list knowing how to avoid. She was purposely trying to avoid getting caught doing this. Well, when you're avoiding getting caught means what you were doing was wrong. And even if you disagree that shouldn't be a law, it is the law. It's the law. Breaking it is wrong. So that's going to work against any kind of insanity defense. On the civil side, certainly the husbands, the 3 children, and one other husband has 1 child with her. They're going to go in civil court and they're going to modify their custody arrangements, because I think the husband that has the 3 children with her has 50-50. Certainly he's going to modify that now in court, because she may face jail time, she may get out, she may not face jail time, depending on what the judge does on the criminal side. But he certainly has a civil action now to go in and modify the custody. Maybe he gets 90-10, or maybe he says whenever she has them, they have to be supervised visits or something like that. Certainly he's going to be able to modify the custody arrangement in the future going down once he gets his children back.
Yeah, and you have to think a to-do list that says get rid of cell phone, buy prepaid cell phone if you're a prosecutor. That's probably a straightforward piece of evidence that you may ever get.
We call that consciousness of guilt.
Yes, yeah, and we'll see how this story plays out. Obviously, really hope these kids are okay, and you know, everybody can get back to Utah, and we'll figure out what happens next. Retired FBI agent and attorney Bobby Chacon, it's always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for being here.
Great to see you, Chris. Thanks.
Before we go, I once again want to put up the number to contact West Jordan Police. Anybody who is watching this, if you have any information about where this mom and these 4 kids may be, contact the West Jordan Police Department's non-emergency number in Utah. That is 801-840-4000. That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.